moving along, we have Dr. Eric Olson, our wheat breeder here at Michigan State. We got a video from Eric, and then I think he'll be available for some questions. So turn it over to Eric's video.
Hello everyone, good to see you all. I'm Eric Olson. I'm a wheat breeder and geneticist at Michigan State University, and thanks for stopping by the Mason farm today. It's a beautiful day to look at some wheat, and so part of our program we work on traits, high yield potential, identifying genes for disease resistance, and quality traits for marketability for our Michigan wheat crop. And part of what we do is develop new varieties. So genetics are constantly changing. There's better, newer and better genetics in the pipeline in commercial varieties out there. So I want to talk with you today about some of the new varieties that have been developed and released in the past few years from our program, varieties that are currently available, and a sneak preview of those that will be available in the next 2 years. Now, as I was saying, varieties are constantly being updated now, and there are improvements, of course, in yield potential, and there's a lot of variation in the traits for these varieties. And so I'll be talking a little bit about some of those traits that are important, those same traits that are important in the breeding cycle as I'm advancing lines through the program and identifying those candidates for release. Those same traits are important for growers and for commercial production. And we have two wheat classes in Michigan, soft red and soft white. So to start, I'd like to talk about Jupiter. Now this is a soft white winter wheat. It took on some large acreage. It's got good stripe rust resistance. So there's some disease traits I'll talk about, maturity, and plant architecture. Three major traits. So Jupiter's generally very short stature variety. Will respond to intensive inputs. It has an architecture that can handle those additional nitrogen and fertilizer and fungicide inputs that are gonna give you a really robust canopy and a heavy crop. It's also very late maturity, so it's on the later end. This is really our check for late maturity. Now, as we shift gears here, we talk about R1140. That's the experimental name. This is available, will be available this fall for planting from Michigan Crop Improvement as Harbor is the variety name. Now, a little bit taller. You can notice we have good height expression this year. We planted early and we have very good height expression, but you can see R1140 is a bit taller. It's substantially taller than Jupiter by several inches, so it really lends to straw production. Now, we also need to consider maturity here. Wheat varieties will flower generally over a 1 to 5 day period. As you can see, there is about 3,000 yield plots behind us right now, and they were flowering over about a 5 day period. So students have been going out here every other day and walking. It's several miles. It's a couple miles through one pass. Anyway. Harbor R1140 is on the very early end of that spectrum. So in very stressful years, you can imagine you get a lot of stem solute accumulation right there. So it's storing some carbohydrates in the stems and pumping that up into these heads later in grain fill. And also that early maturity will buy you an extra potentially 3 days of grain fill, and wheat can do a lot. We can fill a lot of grain in 3 days. So that earliness is an advantage. Also, it's an advantage for management when we consider Fusarium head blight, it makes me very happy to see all the spray tracks. I saw some sprayers running this morning getting the wheat that's flowering. So having that fungicide applied to varieties like R1140 is critical to managing your DON levels, your levels of Fusarium infection. And having two different maturities allows you to spread that work out over several days. So for example, if you had a rain event and your early maturity variety was affected by Fusarium, there's about a 7-day window after flowering that Fusarium can infect, right? And it's the first 3 days where it's the most susceptible. So if you have a rain event, a weather event that's affecting your early maturity crop, you spread your risk by having a later maturity variety that will be less affected, that you can get your fungicide onto that later variety, right? So you're able to spread your risk by spreading maturities. Now moving on, I mentioned Fusarium head blight. That's our second most important trait after grain yield because it affects the marketability of that. We can produce a lot of grain, really high quality grain in this state, but it has to be marketable for that grain to be valuable. So W190, it's the most scab resistant line that we've tested, that we've seen in our experimental lines and also in the commercial program. It's got the FHB1 gene that's been recently cloned and is being pretty widely deployed in soft winter wheat now. But it is the most, it has some additional genes besides FHB1, smaller effect genes. That's good yield potential, but really the FHB1 gene is the most important trait. Now, when you consider varietal resistance, that's the single most important factor in managing scab. You're going to invest in that fungicide, right? That's going to cost you 4 or 5 bushels, depending on your spray operation. Now, having that genetic resistance on top of that is the best policy for controlling scab. If you remember take away one thing from today's talk, it's that managing scab is best done with genetic resistance and management on top of that. So this line is the most scab resistant line that we have seen, and we'll be producing foundation seed of this line this fall, hopefully. So it's still 2 years out for this line. Now, W1039 is another release. This variety will be available this fall through Michigan Crop Improvement. It'll be called Moonlight. Now, it's another variety with very early maturity relative to Jupiter. For white wheat growers, this would be a good addition to your lineup, and very good stable yield potential. It has scab resistance that is an improvement over Jupiter. Now, we do have some extremely scab susceptible varieties in the white wheat market class, and with W190 being the most resistant, and there's some others that are highly susceptible. I put 1039 right in the middle there. It does things a little bit differently, whereas with 190, if you get scab into this spike, the genetic resistance will halt the spread. It'll limit the spread of that pathogen to just one spike. It'll get in the door, but it won't get very far, right? Now, varieties like W1039, be Moonlight, they're a little bit different, where they have, their resistance is similar to how that fungicide protects the crop from actually getting from the initial infection. So having a fungicide protects the pathogen from actually infecting the wheat spike, right? Now there is the genetic factor, right? There's some genetic resistance to that. So we call that type 1 resistance. And so I would say 1039 has pretty good type 1 resistance that actually shows up in the lower DON levels, right? So this is kind of middle of the road for scab resistance. Really good, very stable yield potential, as well as high yield potential. Very stable variety. Now I'm going to shift market classes again, talk about some red wheat. Now, this is R898. This is another experimental line that will be producing some foundation seed. So this one is still 2 years out. It's a beautiful line, shorter architecture. It's got a very, very long spike. So there is some genetic variation for spikelets per spike. This one's got a kind of a bonus spikelet on there if you want to consider it that. It also has the FHB1 resistance gene. The effect, there aren't as many background genes as like with W190, but you can still detect the effect of the FHB1 gene. Very low DON for this variety, short architecture. So these are varieties where you could push the yield potential on those. Now when we're considering $5 wheat or less, now we need to consider our budgets, right? Now you can obtain shorter plant architecture just with genetics. This is data that we collect. My colleague and I, Dennis Pennington, and our team, we collect data on this every year, plant height. So there are shorter varieties just by genetics. So if you're not able to make that investment in a plant growth regulator, you can select based on genetics, right? So we're talking about scab resistance, short plant architecture, and this would be a little bit later maturity too, closer to the Jupiter level, later maturity for 898. Very good line. I'm excited about that line. Now, this is a yield monster right here, 133. It's got very good septoria resistance. It resists those early season pathogens that like to chew on the canopy and climb their way up. They're like playing capture the flag, right? Trying to get to that flag leaf. Now, it very, very high tillering, short plant architecture, similar to 898, a little bit shorter. These plots are a little bit taller than what we've seen in other years. Very high yield potential in this line. It is moderately susceptible to fusarium. So this is one of those varieties that you would definitely need to have a management package put together for this variety. But very high yield potential. I'm excited. This is you know, we've seen several plateaus, new plateaus in yield, and I think we've reached one with this variety. But it's got very good clean canopy and really good yield potential. and a couple of other varieties. We talk about keeping that spike clean for Fusarium, for head scab. For the flag leaf, we really want to keep, of course, keep the Septoria and Staganospora off of that. Fungicides can help with that. The genetic resistance to stripe rust is very critical, and we do have a couple. 1140 and W190 have very strong stripe rust resistance. I don't want to forget about that one. So, when you're looking at these varieties, and it's important to match them up with your management strategy. If you are calendar spraying with a T1, T2, and T3, gives you a little bit more flexibility. You really want to have the scab resistance for that T3 level to interact with the fungicide to get you the best control for scab. But you do have some options, so you can match up those vulnerabilities in your varieties with the strengths of your management practices, or you can identify varieties that have those traits that will that'll allow you to get by without certain management practices, right? You might be able to skip a flag leaf fungicide if you have a very good foliar disease package, and that's what your budgeting allows you to do. Now, got another white wheat variety here. Our program, we have had this program is focused on soft white winter wheat for over 40 years, so we have a very good genetic base, good germplasm base. So W528 is another experimental line. It's a medium to late maturity. Again, very high yield potential in this line, and I do like it. Its scab resistance is it's a great improvement over Jupiter and Ambassador level. It's actually better than W1039. It has very low DON levels. I'm excited about this variety because this was the highest yielding line, higher than all the soft red and soft white checks in our replicated yield trials in 2018. It did well last year, very well actually. So it's another soft white wheat. Now it's important to have these a diversity of varieties available, right? We don't want to create any vulnerabilities, genetic vulnerabilities in the acreages that we have. So from my perspective, it's good for growers in the industry to have options in terms of the varieties that are available to them. Now, I was saving the best for last here. Now, whitetail. Whitetail is kind of a phenomenon. I'm really excited about this variety. So I started in this position in 2014 and came into an existing breeding program. Breeding programs are very long-term investments that pay off over time. They have very stable payoffs, and whitetail is part of that payoff. It's essentially the highest yielding, has the highest two-yield average of any wheat grown in Michigan, soft red and soft white wheat market classes, and so it's very stable yield potential across time. Has very low DON, right? It has a combination of that resistance to initial infection, the type 1 resistance, resistance to Fusarium, so it's very low DON consistently too across multiple years in our Fusarium nursery, and so I'm very excited about the high yield potential, stable yield potential, and reduced risk for Fusarium. So this is really going to be great for our white wheat growers in the state to have this, and for those of you who haven't, who may have walked away from white wheat at some point, may do well to give it a try again. If you have the contracts, a whitetail would be a very good option. It's performed well across the state. It actually does better in the southeast part of the state of all places. It does very well in the thumb as well, but it's just a testament to its broad adaptation and very stable yield potential. So those are the new releases that we have that are either in foundation seed production or so whitetail, there should be more seed available for this fall actually. So it sold out last year, and there should be an abundance of certified seed for planting this fall. So that's our most recent lineup. Of course, we have better things in the pipeline as usual. So but I want to thank you all for stopping by and for visiting with us today. It's a beautiful day to be out here, and I'll be available for questions after the talk. Very good to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Certainly exciting to see those new varieties coming. The dollars we've invested are starting to show some fruit. So you've done a very good job, Eric.
Well, I want to thank you all you growers and in the industry for all the support over the years. We're trying to make the most of that investment, and we couldn't do it without you.
as usual, we'll certainly be glad to see when the plots come to harvest and the data comes out first to see. So once again, thanks to you and Dennis and your staff. Certainly do an excellent job for us here in Michigan. So.
Thank you.
Well, that concludes the presentations from our specialists. We certainly hope you've enjoyed the presentations and you've had a chance to see some of your checkoff dollars at work on the work these researchers have done along with Michigan State University. So.